Coming up in this episode, this movie, it's almost all fictional.
Football movies are generally crap.
Michael Sheen's resplendent.
I always find it an enjoyable watch.
There is this kind of cult around Clough.
Well, there's definitely a darkness to Clough. Cocky, arrogant, ambitious.
There's almost no filter.
Just tell you a little anecdote about Brian Clough. He feels a very sharp blow on his head from behind, and he turns around and it's Clough who's run over to him. I can actually twatted him in the head. He says something like, "Well done, young man."
We kind of miss that, I think, in modern
It's
football.
one of the better ones.
You've interrupted me.
And I think that probably captures some of that restless enigma that was Brian Clough.
Welcome back to the Historical Movies Podcast. My name is Ross, I'm an editor, and I'm joined, as ever, by my brother Bryce, Professor of Modern History at Liverpool Hope University and historical script writer. Bryce, how are you doing?
Very good, thank you, sir, and yourself?
Very well indeed. I've just put up 2 IKEA shelves, the blood is flowing, and I'm ready to sit down and talk with you about Brian Clough's 44-day tenure at Leeds United in 1974, because we're covering The Damned United from 2009. I enjoyed this movie, Bryce, but when I did some research to work out, okay, what history is it based on? It's based on a book by a guy called David Peace from 2006, a novel of the same name. And it said that book was largely fictionalized. So I looked up how much of this movie, kind of really actually happened. And I have to report that it's almost all fictional, which I didn't realize. And to be honest, that did spoil my retrospective viewing of this. I thought, my God, this is like Mel Gibson should have directed this. It's almost like Apocalypto, the amount of the inaccuracies, which I'll get onto. But did it spoil your viewing of this a little bit, or am I being too much of a pedant?
Not for me, because there's enough truth in there for me in terms of the characterization. Although I know the book and the movie were subject to lawsuits, sort of contesting, the veracity of the portrayal. But I didn't really have a problem with that, I have to admit. I think it as a sort of slice of history. We've discussed this many times. Liberties, inevitably will be taken, and there's enough there, in terms of the broad brushstrokes for me to be satisfied.
Well, it's going to be almost impossible not to do a Brian Clough impression during this podcast. So, Bryce, as a man of reading and books and that type of thing, what does this movie say about football and life in Britain in the 70s? And does it do a good job, young man?
You mentioned David Peace. We've got to, and I've read The Damned United, and I've read some of his other stuff. And so I think before we even discuss the movie, I'm going to answer your question in a David Peace narrative style.
Okay.
The Damned United is a movie. The Damned United is a movie about Brian Clough. Brian Clough of Derby County Football Club and briefly Leeds United Football Club. Brian Clough, the manager of Leeds United Football Club. The manager of Leeds United Football Club in the 1970s. Brian Clough, the manager of Leeds United Football Club for 44 days. As you will have gathered from that very poor parody, I'm not a fan of David Peace. Mm-hmm. David Peace's narrative style is based on that kind of repetitious, tedious repetition. I'll give you another example of this. This is from his more recent book about Red or Dead. And Red or Dead is about Bill Shankly, the great Liverpool manager of the same era. In fact, you see that clip from this famous 74 Charity Shield.
Oh, I love fight. It. I love that fight. Yeah.
Shankly obviously was the manager then of Liverpool.
Yeah.
And Clough of Leeds. I'll just give you a little excerpt from Red or Dead, which is a fictional biography of Bill Shankly. Nowhere and nothing but the sounds of chains rattling, knives sharpening, spades digging, at your back, in your shadow, rattling, sharpening, digging, and ticking. The clock ticking, no matter what you knew, no matter what you did, the clock ticking, always ticking, binding you, stabbing you, burying you, in the wasteland, in the wilderness, no matter what you know, no matter what you believed, no matter what you did, there was always, already, the wasteland. There was always, already. I think he's shite.
But does this? But does it affect the movie? Because we don't get that from the movie, do we?
No, it doesn't. But I suppose no, I actually think the movie's better than the book. I don't like David Peace's style.
So hang on, you've had a go at David Peace, but it's got nothing to do with the movie.
What I'm saying is the sort of laser-like focus on that very short period of Clough's career is hinted at by what I've just told you from Peace there. That's a very repetitious, focused style. Because it is, in some ways, that Leeds United episode is just a snapshot of Clough's career, because as we see at the end of the movie, his most illustrious stuff is later on with Nottingham Forest. It's a very long career. So this isn't a sort of, what am I getting at here? This isn't a biopic. This is just focusing on a sort of character-driven, very short period of time.
Time for a very short interruption. It's Ross here. Thanks very much for listening on YouTube. Don't forget to check out all of our other episodes, and we'd love to hear from you, so leave us a comment. And any sharing or liking or subscribing you can do would really help the podcast. So thanks a lot. Yeah, well, it kind of struck me that it's not really about his time at Leeds United, is it, this movie? We don't go deep into... We don't see any of the matches. We don't go deep into the tactics of what he got wrong. We have a couple of training ground scenes. You can throw all your winner's medal in the bin and all of that. But we don't really go into depth of like the football history of him at Leeds United. It's about his building up to Leeds United. And then I suppose we get at the end of the movie, his wonderful achievements at Nottingham Forest. So... it's not really heavily focused on that, which I was kind of surprised at because I didn't know anything about this movie before I saw it. I think it's incumbent on me to come up with some of the things you've mentioned, some of the inconsistencies, some of the inaccuracies in this movie, because it shaded my sort of retrospective viewing, as I said. You mentioned that the production company of the movie was sued, and also Johnny Giles had already successfully sued the publishers of the book. Dave Mackay sued Left Bank Pictures. That's the producers of this movie. BBC sports journalist Pat Murphy, a personal friend of Clough, noted 17 factual inaccuracies in the film regarding the timing of events and the scene where Clough stays in the dressing room versus Leeds. I've got a list, Bryce, which I won't go through now. Needless to say, there's a huge list of stuff that has been changed in this. In some stuff as well, like the 1-0 loss to Luton Town was actually 1-1. And I'm thinking, well, why are they changing that kind of stuff? I know they're doing it for dramatic reasons, but it kind of... I'll tell you the reason why I have problems with this is because although Sheen gives a brilliant portrayal of Clough in this movie, when you read so much of the fact that this is all fictionalized, it kind of takes away from the verisimilitude or, the believability of the piece.
I think it probably captures the gnawing ambition of Brian Clough, which was sadly later on to sort of give way to sort of increasing alcoholism quite well. So I don't have the same sort of problems there, because you see Clough, the pretender to the throne, the greatest manager England never had. As a character study, it's not inaccurate, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
I do think that, coming back to Sheen, great performance, agreed. His accent does lapse into his native Welsh.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
On occasion. Quite funny.
Just before we move on, I want to talk about Sheen's performance as Clough, but listeners are probably thinking, well, tell us what these inaccuracies are. I'm just going to go through a few. So there's some things like the signing of key players, Dave Mackay, was it Dave Mackay? John McGovern and John O'Hare were not all at the same time. The smoking and drinking of Clough is inaccurate for this period. Here's one. Brian Clough managed Brighton and Hove Albion for 32 games before he departed in July 1974 and did not accept the Leeds job in Mallorca. That's all nonsense. That's a massive change, which I thought was quite striking. And then there's a list of other results that they've changed. There's also the implication that he reunited straight away with Taylor, but he didn't reunite with him until a couple of years later. I can forgive that kind of stuff. And also the interview at the end, Clough knew in advance that Revie would also be in that interview. So it's fictionalized, the fact that they sting him with that. Anyway, I want to talk about now Michael Sheen. So he does give a great performance. Your friend of mine, Roger Ebert, said that he portrays modern British icons so uncannily that he's all but disappeared into them, talking of Sheen's. I mean, that is an American talking about, as we've just mentioned, someone lapsing into a Welsh accent. But other than that, I think he gives a great performance, doesn't he? What is it about Brian Clough that he captures so well in this movie?
Well, like I said, it's the restless ambition, the cockiness. I think the main point about Clough is he really you got. I think we've got to consider the politics of Clough coming from the English northeast, a left winger, someone who was very much anti-establishment. Probably why he didn't get the England job, because the suits at the FA, in London, didn't like him. He was cocky. He was outspoken. We're kind of used to that now in terms of television punditry.
Mm.
For the time, what is captured well here is that Clough was cocky, arrogant, ambitious, and very, I would say, sort of very anti-establishment. I think in terms of the football establishment and the political establishment to a degree.
We see in this movie that he's pissed off with the shareholders and Uncle Sam. He calls Jim Broadbent's character. He's always rubbing up against those authoritative powers.
Yeah, and it's quite funny, isn't it, when he's looking up at Don Revie, played by Colm Meaney, sort of quite satisfied Don Revie. Don Revie singing "God Save the Queen," and this is before the charity show. He's tight-lipped, isn't he? He's not, so it's symbolic of the fact that he hates these well-fed men in suits. Considering his sort of the trajectory of his personal struggle. So I think it captures all of that stuff about Clough really well. I did, when I rewatched this, I did think, oh my goodness, this is it's almost like the British social realism movie bingo is going on here, because of course, there's Jim Broadbent, tick. There is
some old cobbled streets in the back alley, tick.
yeah, but the actors, they're all the set, aren't they? There's Timothy
Spall, Stephen Graham,
Stephen Graham, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, gritty British actors. Tick, 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 tick. But I think it really does, his obsessive rivalry with Revie. There's a great violent football montage at the beginning of this movie, introducing the style of Leeds United. And that is broadly true, that they played a much more violent style, and Clough was much more in favour of fairer play. We also get that legendary fight between Kevin Keegan and Billy Bremner, where Kevin Keegan says, "Come off it, Bob, man! I've not done all. I've been hit twice." As he's leaving the pitch, as he's getting sent off.
You've got to be on the side of the goodies in this, be it the legendary Electric Mouse, as he's called, Kevin Keegan, or Cloughie, and against the thuggery of and the cheating of Leeds United. That's not untrue. They were a dirty, dishonest side. And which leads us to our best scene, I think, of the movie, when he gives them that dressing down. Put your medals in the bin.
When he's on, because you won them unfairly. Is this the best football movie then, Bryce? Because we spoke when we did Escape to Victory that it's a poor crop. Let's be honest. Football movies or soccer movies, to our listeners in America. This is, according to Internet Movie Database, this is second behind the two Escobars 2010, which is about Andreas and Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar, the drug runner, and Andreas Escobar, was he the Colombian footballer that was killed, I think, wasn't he? I haven't seen that movie.
In World Cup 94. I have not seen that movie. Now, I said before, I think, football movies are generally crap.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is, with the exception of parody movies like Mike Bassett, England Manager.
Oh, good one. That's a good one.
But this is I think in a as you say, generally poor crop, a poor sort of genre or subgenre. This generally does fairly well. I'll just tell you a little anecdote about Brian Clough, where you mentioned Escobar, the Colombian player who was killed in World Cup '94. Another player in World Cup '94, former professional whom I wrote the biography of, Alan McLaughlin, now sadly passed away, who played in that World Cup, who was an Irish professional footballer, told me a story about Brian Clough, which I think probably captures and this is probably in his more alcoholic later years, but it captures the nature of the man, which, I'll just tell you. So Clough's mighty Nottingham Forest are playing Portsmouth, for whom McLaughlin plays, FA Cup quarter-final 1992. Portsmouth, a division below the mighty Forest, win the game unexpectedly. McLaughlin scores the winner. And on the final whistle, Clough McLaughlin is celebrating this big win. They're into the semi-final of the FA Cup. Suddenly, he feels a very sharp blow on his head from behind, a really strong punch, and he turns around and it's Clough who's run over to him and I can honestly twatted him in the head from behind, full on, really sore. And then he turned round and Clough's there, and he says something like, "Well done, young man," and then sort of trots off. And I think that probably captures some of that. How can we say restless enigma that was Brian Clough?
I think you've described him perfectly, restless enigma.
When we think about that, I think, to come back to your question, they've done a fairly good job here with this movie.
Yeah, I've got a few anecdotes from some of his antics. Famously brought a broken kettle of his wife Barbara to Stuart Pearce when he was just starting at Nottingham Forest, because Stuart Pearce was an electrician, and said, "Right, young man, mend that for me by tomorrow." Punch Roy Keane in the face, maybe one of his greatest achievements.
I think we'd all like to do that. Fair play.
Keane said it was the best thing he ever did for me, kept me grounded. I noticed there is this kind of cult around Clough. There's also a goalkeeper called Mark Crossley. I don't know if you come across this guy.
Who played for Forest in the 90s, yeah.
Exactly, but it appears to me, he basically does now, like, after dinner circuits. That's how he makes his money, telling Clough stories. And, listen to these people say, I think there's a lot of it going on. But that's basically how he makes his money now. Like, that's his job, basically. But also, it seems to me like there's this kind of, obviously Brian Clough now these days is, it doesn't fly, it doesn't work these days. But there seems to be a kind of semi-violent aspect to a lot of his behavior that instills a kind of cultish loyalty in the fellow players that he abused.
And the cultish loyalty is overplayed in the sense that you think, like, there's famous clips of Clough during a pitch invasion. I can't remember in what era of Clough this was, probably in the alcoholic later years, late 80s and 90s, where he's running on and he's attempting to throw supporters off the pitch. He's attacking supporters who've invaded the pitch, which some people would say, is proper order too. But I think Clough also, he later retracted this to an extent. I don't think, humility was one of his great virtues, but he did, I think, retract this to an extent. But he did come out, not unusually for the time, but, considering his politics, a little bit disappointing, because he sort of came out and talked about the Hillsborough disaster, where Liverpool fans were killed, crushed to death, no fault of their own, and blamed Liverpool fans for that, which we now know is completely untrue, and never really issued a full apology for that, although he did sort of qualify those statements. So there's definitely a very nasty hard edge. What would we call it today? A toxic masculinity, perhaps.
Toxic work atmosphere. There's a little bit of a bitterness there, isn't there?
On the other hand, different era. I know a lot of people justify a lot of stuff by saying, "Oh, that was the 70s," which is wrong. A lot of stuff that happened in the 70s is wrong in any era. Like paedophilia, etc. You can't just say, "Oh, well, that was the 70s." But at the same time, I suppose it was a different era, and it was and very much a man's game.
We kind of miss him, don't we, these days? I think we miss that kind of charismatic enigma, as you said. There's one of my all-time favorite clips on YouTube is Brian Clough being interviewed by John Motson, the football pundit and uber football nerd who did football television and punditry for, it seems like, 50 years or something on the BBC. And I think John Motson just asked him how the season's going, and he starts on a rant about how annoying he finds Match of the Day. And we don't actually, John, it used to be enjoyable going home and sitting and watching the game. We need a bit less of that talking and a bit more football. And if that's not in a nutshell, I don't know what is. And he says that, and he goes on this great rant. It's well worth looking at. There's also a great interview of him with being interviewed by David Frost. But he seems like a character that has this kind of internal self-dialogue going on, or, it doesn't seem... I'll give you another example. On a 5-2 win, Nottingham Forest, famously, Clough ran onto the pitch and kissed each of the Nottingham Forest players on the lips. And apparently he often used to bring his dog Del Boy into the dressing room and treated it like a coaching assistant. So, you know, I suppose you would say these days that I don't know if he's bipolar or something, but, you know, of its time or whatever. But the point I wanted to make about the punditry is actually, you know, sometimes I watch football and I just want to watch the game. I don't want to hear commentary the whole time. I'm fed up of stats. I'm fed up of XG or whatever the latest new stat is. I just want to sit down and watch football. And, you know, I think Cloughy, you know, has that kind of no nonsense attitude. I think why people are magnetically drawn to him is because he is clearly, there's almost no filter. He's saying what he's thinking at the moment in time, whether it's wrong or right or too passionate or bitter or loving or whatever it is. I think that's probably why. And we kind of miss that, I think, in modern football. We have too many media trained personalities on television who are walking a very thin tightrope of perhaps what they can say. I don't want to get into that debate, but you know, I think it's the world of football today is perhaps missing Cloughy. Is it?
True. At the same time, in some ways, especially in terms of English footballing history, Clough ushered in the modern era in terms of its money and its obsessive excessiveness. In some ways, he kind of sort of is symbolic of that modern football as well. So, yeah, I suppose in a way we can get misty eyed for Cloughy, but in the same way he represents modern football in many ways, especially the money side to things, you know. And you know, you that little bit at the end about Don Revie, and he's involved in a corruption scandal in the UAE, and
Yeah.
you know, a lot of the time, okay, footballers these days are paid mega bucks. Before we get to that era, which is really, you know, mid to late 90s onwards, a lot of them were very money obsessed. They had to be. You know, it was a short. You look at Clough's playing career; it was wiped out at the age of 29. And they coming from poor backgrounds. So Clough is coming from a relatively poor background. I think he's one of eight or something, isn't he? And of course they were money obsessed. And of course there were, you know, inevitably there was an element of corruption there when they weren't earning the sort of money they earn today.
But just one final question before we get on to our questions, Bryce. Our list of questions we asked. Thematically, this movie is it a tragedy? I read that Peace, the author, is drawn to tragedies. He says that's what he likes to write about. Is it a tragedy? Is it a redemption story? Is it something else? Is it a bit confused? What is this? How do we can we put this in a bin? This movie?
I think it's a tragicomic, but I think the book itself is fairly a little bit darker in a way. You know, Sheen brings that on-screen sparkle and charisma, I suppose, captures Clough well, but there's definitely a darkness to Clough, and I think that comes through more in the book. Perhaps that there's definitely a real dark, slightly unsettling edge to that book. So yeah, I'd say this is probably tragicomic kind of piece. Do you think it's a tragedy? This?
Well, I noticed when I watched this, I don't know what streaming service it was, I've forgotten, but it was, I think it's drama/comedy. I didn't find it particularly funny, I've got to be honest. There are some amusing moments in it, and I think it's more kind of, in terms of comedy, it's almost like more of a situational comedy. We get those, there's a mention, isn't there, of the 3-day working week, which of course in the 70s in the Edward Heath Conservative government and energy crisis and stuff like that. And there's a lot of dimly lit interiors, and that really,
it's so bleak.
Yeah,
it's very bleak,
muddy
isn't it?
pitches, look like a cow's field, you know, turnip patches, you know,
paint peeling off the walls of every changing room. It's the sort of unremitting bleakness of 70s Britain.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just so sort of always gives me the willies when I see depictions of, I have to say, sort of 70s and 80s Britain, even stuff like Billy Elliot, etc. Just looks so depressing.
Yeah, they do. Our list of questions we ask of every movie. I'm thinking of bringing in a new question, Bryce.
Go on.
What would Brian Clough think of this movie?
Yeah.
What would Cloughy say? Imagine Cloughy doing a review of 10,000 BC. Too many dinosaurs.
He's going to be quite scathing, isn't he? I mean, I can't see him, you know, lauding some of the stuff we've watched, like Marie Antoinette, for example.
Okay, so I didn't get any trivial trivia this week, I'm afraid, listeners. But Bryce, too long, too short. This is 97 minutes long. I think it's a good length of a movie. We've often lamented the fact that movies now just go on for too long. I thought this was good. We don't need to have a series.
Well, you love your hour and a half long pieces, don't you? And really, 97 minutes, that's about the duration of a football match, including injury time, isn't it?
Exactly. Maybe that was intentional. What was your favourite character or performance? We can't look past Michael Sheen, can we?
I think we can look at Stephen Graham's Billy Bremner, the sort of psychotic glint in his eye, the curly red hair, the sort of like, silent, I'm going to get you, Clough.
Yeah.
Grabbing his nether regions, the little nod to Don Revie there before the sort of psycho violence takes over in the cup final. There's obviously always a menacing quality to Stephen Graham, so I'd probably pick him out. I think I'm suffering from Jim Broadbent fatigue.
Yeah, me too.
Although I have to say, he's always, to be fair, he's always pretty good quality, isn't he? I think as well, Colmini does a very good.
He does.
Don Revie as the villain of the piece. Quite funny to find. Don Revie, is often portrayed as a bit of a villainous figure because of his horrible Leeds team, and then the sort of corruption later on. Going to the Middle East.
Do you know what happened? I didn't have time to look this up, but do you know what actually happened in terms of the corruption?
I think it was just bribery. But I was just going to say, quite a funny villain of the piece, because whenever you see actual, I don't think in the movie, if memory serves, but when you look at actual clips of 70s football and Don Revie's in the dugout or walking from the dugout, he's always carrying a blanket.
Yeah, he is.
So he's quite a sort of for a villainous figure. He's got that. I always think of our grandmother, and she'd always have her little blanket on when we go for drives out to Phoenix. Quite got that sort of granny blanket.
Well, there's original kind of feel to him. Is Sam Allardyce basically Don Revie reincarnated? Well, their lives, they're actually probably alive at the same time, so maybe they're related.
I saw that there'd been a mural has been a guerrilla mural has been done of Big Sam in somewhere in the West Midlands where he's from. Someone's painted a huge Big Sam on the side of a house.
Perhaps
and he's
by him.
proclaimed himself very happy with it.
Good to know.
I think he's eating some chips. We can look this up.
Probably live Googling.
Big Sam
while you Google that, I'll see
mural.
if I can hire. How much it costs to hire Mark Crossley.
Mysterious Sam Allardyce mural appears in Dudley, and it is indeed of Sam Allardyce eating chips. I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to hold it up. Hang on, where's me?
I think it's basic. Sorry, listeners, you won't be able to see it. Basically, isn't that famous meme of him? Oh, I know it's not, but someone inserted a picture of him when he's on the bench with his sort of looking ponderously towards a game of football, and they superimposed a chip shop in the background, so it looks like he's not sure what to order.
Listeners who aren't familiar with Sam Allardyce, just to fill them in, especially maybe to our listeners across the pond, Sam Allardyce is how can we describe him? An unreconstructed man of British football.
While you were looking that up, Bryce, I can tell you that Mark Crossley speaking fees for after dinner events typically range from £1,500 to £2,000.
Well, I think that's pretty good value for a few coffee anecdotes.
And a half decent impression. Right, where were we? Favorite scene? Yours was the arrival at Leeds. Is it when he goes, "You can throw all your medals in the bin"? Is that your favorite? Irishman.
Yes. Yes, definitely. That's the best scene. It's bristling. He's bristling with uncomfortableness, isn't it?
I quite enjoyed the TV interview at the end, which you can see the actual interview. I watched it. I think it's about 26 minutes. It's on YouTube, which is actually a lot less confrontational. They're actually sort of quite nice to each other for most of the time. And there's a great moment where they both keep lambasting or keep telling off the reporter for interrupting. And one moment, Clough says, "Yeah, Don Revie is a great manager." And then the reporter says, "What about this?" "You've interrupted me, young man. You've interrupted me. Don Revie is a great manager." That's what I wanted to say. And he didn't say anything else. He wasn't even being interrupted. It's brilliant. It's well worth having a look at. So what part should Mel Gibson, Daniel Day-Lewis, or Marlon Brando have played, Bryce?
Well, there's plenty of roles for macho men in this movie, isn't there? So I suppose you can almost
Leeds
slot
United.
them into literally any character in this very violent and macho world.
Yeah, they could all be playing for Leeds United. Who should do the DVD commentary? Do we think Cloughy himself should do it?
John Motson would be good, actually.
Motto.
Right.
Yeah.
John Motson, again, to our listeners who don't know who that is, a famous nerdy English commentator. R.I.P.
Best companion film?
Mike Bassett, England manager.
Oh, that's a great show. That's a great movie. Unfortunately, we can't do it because it's fictionalized. But that is probably the best football film I've ever seen. That's really a great parody of football, particularly English managers in late 90s, early 2000s. And it is based, I think, on the Graham Taylor Do I Not Like That documentary, which is pure hilarity in itself, in spite of the fact it's just a documentary. Can we not knock it? Another famous things.
Yes, it depicts the ascent of a very, how can we put it, uneducated Northern English man to the heights of England manager, which of course Cloughy never quite got to.
No. Hall of Fame, Bryce. What are you putting in our museum? A prop it can be, or an historical item?
Let me think about this. What would you put in there?
Well, I quite like the towel, orange and ashtray combo that Cloughy prepares for the first visit of Leeds to Derby County's ground. I thought that was quite good. Either that or I enjoyed the pre-match cups of tea. You know, nutritionists probably sweating bricks looking at that.
Complete with saucers.
Sorry?
Complete with saucers, teacups and saucers.
Yeah, like fine china tea before the game. Or like Clough's like classic red polo shirt under like a V-neck sweatshirt, short shorts and rolled down football socks and football boots. Maybe that, like in that training scene that you mentioned, but in a lot of the footage of Clough, he appears that's his like normal wear for when he's a football manager. I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, in his later years, I mean, I remember him sort of right in the 90s, and he looked awful. But I mean, the alcoholism, I think, had really taken over then. And his face was all sort of
spotty,
weather beaten and sort of cratered and red.
Yeah.
Again, I think from the booze, the burst blood vessels, etc. But he always seemed to be wearing a sort of snot green Nottingham Forest training top all the time.
Yeah,
but all the time. I mean, did he sleep in it? He certainly, he seemed to sort of stick with favourite items of clothing, didn't he?
What would happen in the sequel if there was one?
Well, I think he'd get the. Is it going to be realism or fiction?
It can be whatever you choose.
I think he gets the England job.
Oh, that's a great the best manager England ever had.
Sticks to the establishment.
I was thinking that his remarkable run at Nottingham Forest, which I know that he did wonders. I didn't really appreciate how incredible it was. So he took a mid-table second division team to the European Championships in 5 years with moderate spending. So they were promoted to the first division in 76-77, first division champions the following year, and then the following year European Cups. The following year European Cups back to back too. 4 League Cups between 77 and 90, and 1 UEFA Super Cup in 79. That's incredible, isn't it? Especially that span from 76 to, where are we? 78, 79, when they're just winning everything.
It's astounding. It really is astounding. And when you think of, like a fairly provincial club like Forest, they're kind of a bit full of themselves these days, Forest fans. But to do that twice, and let's not forget as well, Clough, I think, is one of only 4 managers to have won the English League Championship with 2 different sides. It's remarkable, really, when you think about it.
Pedant's Corner, Bryce. Clough's Jaguar XJ6 has the registration plate PND7M, which, although an authentically formatted 1973 car registration plate number, was never registered to a Jaguar in real life.
Well, that just ruined the movie for me.
And also, the Derby County training ground fence slats appear in the movie as painted in alternating light and dark shades of brown. However, the real contemporary fence slats were actually painted a single shade of grey, as witnessed by photographs from the era, but not, it would seem, by the filmmakers. A particularly bitter online trivia writer there. Did you get anything for Sude's Corner? I saw that your friend of mine, Peter Bradshaw in The Guardian, loved this movie. He gave it 4 out of 5. Quite a glowing review, wasn't it?
I didn't see that, actually. I'm sorry, I didn't have anything for Sude's Corner because I had enough of David Peace's literary style to fill that brief.
So, what is your coveted marks out of 10, Bryce? How did you get on with the movie? What did you think of The Damned United?
I think it's a good piece, actually, and I think it's a good snapshot of English football and its characters in that period, despite its liberties. I always find it an enjoyable watch, and in a very poor subgenre, it's one of the better ones. So I'm actually going to give it a 7.
I'm glad you said 7. Again, I thought you were going to say I'm going to give it a 4 because it was so enjoyable. I also gave it a 7. I think it is a really great movie. Michael Sheen's resplendent. I just think there's one or two scenes that don't quite. Timothy Spall, I know he's a great actor, but sometimes that relationship between the two of them annoyed me more than excited me. I don't know. And then Jim Broadbent, also getting a bit fed up of Jim Broadbent playing himself in every movie. No, I really enjoyed it. I think it's great movie. Really immersed me in 1970s football, which really, that's all we're asking this movie to do. So that was very enjoyable. Bryce, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, young man.
Thank you on the Historical Movies podcast. Don't forget, the best way to get in contact with us is at historicalmoviespodcast@gmail.com, or if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment, a like and a subscribe massively helps. So thank you very much. And if you leave a review on your chosen podcast platform, that also is a huge help that you can do for free to support the podcast. So thank you very much for listening. And we'll see you in the next episode of the Historical Movies podcast. That's it for this episode of the Historical Movies podcast. Don't forget to leave us a review on your chosen podcast platform. Spotify and Apple Podcasts make a huge difference to the algorithm. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to leave a comment or a like or subscribe. Thanks very much for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.